This happened when I was a child in Argentina. My parents used to let me play in the garden at a large public park near where we lived, filled with colorful flowers, and I remember it was a beautiful place. When I was there, I was approached by small, translucent gnomes who told me they were my friends. We would spend the mornings together playing tea parties and dolls and other children's games. They talked to me and would bring me berries from a nearby hawthorn tree. I often tried to touch their beards or their arms, but whenever I did, that part of them would fade away. Where I touched them, I felt a slight sensation, almost like static electricity. What I remember most about them was their eyes. They had wrinkled faces, long noses, and long ears, but their eyes were very large, very clear, and incredibly kind. There was something so warm and just captivating about them. For many days, they were my friends, and we spent our mornings playing together. Before they left, they asked me not to forget them when I grew up. I never did. Today, I still believe these beings were real, and that experience marked me for the rest of my life. As I grew older, I came to believe they were beings connected to plants and trees, part of nature itself. Later, when I learned more about fairy folklore, I realized there was a connection between what I had seen as a child and what people describe as fairies. Since I was a teenager, I have studied the subject and have had many other unusual experiences, but these childhood encounters remain the most vivid and the most beautiful in my mind. I made a promise that I would never forget them, and I have tried to share what happened with others here in Argentina. I was visiting a well known outdoor monument called Valle del Encanto, Enchantment Valley in Chile. The place has ancient petroglyphs and art depicting shamanic ceremonies and small animals. It's a rocky place with hills and slopes covered by cacti, acacia trees, and bushes around a winding brook that goes along the site. There was peace and tranquility since there were no other visitors. The atmosphere was delightful with just the sounds of nature, the bubbling brook, the birds chirping, and soft wind blowing on a perfect cloudless sky. After setting up my campsite, I went for a walk in the area. I went down a path surrounded by thickets and some willow trees heading eastward to a boulder, which is terraced in the slope of the rolling hill. It's a massive egg-shaped stone that I wanted to climb. I had a strange feeling that I was being guided to that place. Every nook was like calling me and leading me to the rocky spot. When I reached the top, I felt like just sitting and sensing the place. Although I didn't mean to do meditation or contemplation, I felt like the place was gradually relaxing me until I just closed my eyes to feel the whole valley. I don't recall how long I was in that state, but something suddenly made me open my eyes, like a presence next to me. And I was shocked when I saw a 30-centimeter tall, native looking little man. A smiley face with the sweetest and most gentle semblance I've ever seen. Hair like yellow straw and copper nuances, sun-tanned cinnamon skin, naked torso with bracelets in both upper arms, small river pebbles in a necklace, and wearing short pants in green and sandals. He had a tiny bongo drum hanging aside him and a little round purple bag in the belt that was just a piece of fine, thin rope. I had mixed emotions, thrilled but peaceful, excited but calm. In some way, I knew that I'd seen this little man before, since I had experiences with pixies and fairies when I was a child. However, my previous childhood experiences, I took them as normal and natural as it was part of my childhood stage. This time was an overwhelmingly happy reunion in a sense, although this little fellow looked completely different from the ones I used to see in my childhood. He was translucent in the beginning, but as I stared at him without even blinking, he became gradually more tangible. Soon I was able to talk to him, and he responded. But his voice I could hear inside my brain like a high-pitched little voice. He then revealed to me something unbelievable. He said that we had met before, in a past life, and that in that life we had arranged this very meeting. It was meant to happen because I have a connection with the little people, the gnomes. They wanted me to manifest them into visible form and transmit their messages. After this reunion, I started to call him Little Bongo, and we are sometimes in contact and working together up to the present. I model him in terracotta clay, and I've been writing a book about my experiences, my work with elemental beings, and Little Bongo's teachings. Now, before ending my story, a few words from the little people to humankind. We love you deeply. He looked like a South American little man. There's a petroglyph which is called the Little Pixie by the park ranger. Why fairies? Because it was clear for me, my senses and my intuition. Fairies are spiritual entities made of flower scent and air element. My grandmother, who is a witch, kept a beautiful garden of flowers and vegetables on the roof of our home in Colombia. Every evening around twilight, she would go up there to water the plants. One evening, when I was still very young, she asked me to come with her. As she watered the flowers, she told me that the fairies helped her keep the garden healthy and beautiful. Then she asked me to stop talking and listen carefully to the church bells chiming in the distance. The usual breeze of the evening started to blow, and she told me to ask permission to see them. She started to sing like a whisper, and then I could see two fairies moving between the roses. They would kind of show themselves and disappear, and lasted a couple of minutes. My grandma said she saw them constantly and she would talk to them. She also said they would visit her sometimes in her sleep and teach her how to heal people using plants. Our house always seemed full of fairy activity. Some of the beings were kind, while others were not. At night, I sometimes heard little footsteps running through the house, and occasionally dishes would mysteriously break. But this was the first and only time I ever saw them clearly with my own eyes. I remember they were white and pink, with tiny golden sparkles. I was very young, so I can't remember every detail, but I distinctly remember that two of them had heads that looked like rosebuds, almost as though they had grown from the flowers themselves. I live in Finland now, and while I don't have the same experiences anymore, I do sometimes hear strange drumming sounds and wind instruments, and occasionally a female singer, and I can identify the source. I think fairies are beings that can move freely between dimensions and have a deep connection with Earth. When I was a teenager, I was walking with my older sister to visit my brother who lived about 2 kilometers from our home in the Caribbean. It was around 7 o'clock in the evening. The sun had already set, but there was still enough light to see clearly. We were walking along a quiet country road when we came to an intersection. One narrow path disappeared into the woods, while the other led toward a nearby gully. As we approached, I saw 7 figures emerge from the woodland path. They were dressed like monks, wearing long dark blue robes, with their hoods pulled low over their heads. Their hands were hidden inside their sleeves and folded across their chests. They walked silently in single file, crossing the road in front of us before continuing toward the gully. The only sound was the wind moving through the branches overhead. It created a strange, almost musical rustling among the leaves, though there was no actual music. When they were gone, I turned to my sister, but she hadn't seen them at all. Now, that stretch of road has always had a reputation for ghost stories, but what I saw didn't feel like ghosts. Even today, I don't know what those 7 silent figures were. I only know that I saw them clearly, while the person walking beside me saw nothing at all. The reason I think they might have been fairies as opposed to something else is because I don't really believe in aliens, and I kind of believe angels are really someone's ancestors looking after them. I did not get a ghost vibe from the experience. I think fairies are either human sized or child sized spiritual beings attached to places, either natural settings or man made. This happened to me and my siblings several times throughout our childhood in Nigeria, but the most vivid recollection I have is the very first time it happened. Me, my brother, and my sister were doing some grocery shopping with the nanny. We were driving down the road when we saw a flock of white birds flying through the sky. I'm not sure what kind of birds they were. They could have been doves, but they seemed a little larger, like the size of seagulls. When she saw them, our nanny pointed to them and said, "Look, you see those birds? If you say this rhyme and flap your hands like wings, the birds will bless you. You will know because you will see them on your fingernails." We were like, "What?" "Yeah, right." She said, "Try it." She proceeded to say this short, sing-songy type of rhyme. I can't remember the words, but it must have been simple enough because we repeated it after her, word for word. As we were singing, we flapped our hands as if they were wings, just like she told us. She said, "Okay, in a few days, look at your fingernails and you will see those birds." We didn't believe her, but we giggled and brushed it off. A few days later, I think it was Saturday, I woke up and started heading to the bathroom. Halfway there, my brother intercepted me with a huge smile on his face. He said, "Look." He showed me his fingernails, and there were these little white markings on them. He told me to check my fingernails, so I did, and sure enough, I had the same little white markings on my nails too. They looked like flying birds. If you've ever seen a drawing or a painting with birds flying in the distance, that's exactly what they look like white birds flying in the distance, on our fingernails. Then I remembered the little rhyme we sang in the car a few days earlier. My brother, with a huge grin on his face, said, "It worked." I remember feeling so exhilarated. It was literally like finding out those magical realms we would read about in books were actually real. I'm not sure if there were any fairies involved in those experiences, but there were for sure some unseen magical forces at play. I think all sorts of nature spirits exist, and fairies are just one type. I was taught that each element had a particular type of soul associated with it, and these spirits acted like caretakers to that element. What we call fairies look after flowers and different kinds of small plants. The nature spirits can be bigger than skyscrapers or tiny as ants, but they all look after what we call nature. Every culture has them, and if you look at every culture's mythology, you will see they have the same characters. Because even though we are different, we're all perceiving the same living energy that comes from the same source. We just see it in our own different way. My experience took place in the spring of 2016, just before noon in France. I was standing outside the apartment building where I lived, waiting for my ex-husband to bring the car out of the garage so we could go grocery shopping. Between the building and the street was a small garden. The gardeners had just planted red and pink begonias for spring, and among them were dandelions, buttercups, daisies, violets, and a few mushrooms. Beyond the driveway was a large park filled with trees and flowers. It was sunny, strong, and bright, but it was not very hot yet. I was taking a bit of sun, looking at the begonias and admiring how the sun made the petals appear as if they were covered in sugar. They shone as if they had crystals on them. While I stood there admiring them, I found myself thinking about my home country of Peru. I wished there were more flowers and trees in Lima, and less cement and concrete. I wished that people had flowers in gardens there, not simply grass. I was in this state, just appreciating the beauty of nature, when I became aware of something hovering beside me. About 1 or 2 feet away floated a tiny sphere of transparent blue light, no more than an inch across. It drifted gently from side to side, almost as if it were trying to catch my attention. Everything around me had become strangely quiet. I stared at it, wondering if it could somehow be a reflection from a nearby window, but there was no one around and nothing that could have produced it. I kept looking at the blue energy sphere, and then a tiny, thin body began to manifest inside it, almost like an outlined drawing, very schematic in slightly darker blue lines. Perhaps the body was also transparent in relief. It had pointed wings, I think 2 pairs. I think it was female because I had the feeling it was. And then I said to myself, it's a fairy. I quickly reached for my mobile phone, hoping to take a photograph. The little figure continued drifting gently from side to side for another moment, and then vanished. I never managed to take the picture. I think that if I had tried to touch it, it would have been like touching a light, perhaps immaterial, but since I didn't try, I don't know. But it looked like a presence. It was there. Why a fairy? Because of the context in which it occurred, garden, flowers, sun, light, and above all, because I saw the almost human body with wings inside the energy sphere. And when I realized what I was seeing, when I thought, it's a fairy, it disappeared. Perhaps it manifested as it did because it knew that the only fairy I had known in image was the one from Pinocchio by Disney, a film I saw in my childhood. And also because it left me with a feeling of peace, and not of fear, chills, dread, or strangeness, as might have happened if it was a ghost or something else. I think fairies are beings or spirits of nature that manifest for some reason to certain people. In my case, perhaps it was to encourage or reward my thoughts on nature, and to encourage me to continue promoting gardens, which I do every time I meet someone and the occasion arises to talk about nature or plant care. I tell them about the importance of helping, even with small gestures. After that experience, I do believe in fairies. It was an experience that changed my perspective about things. It also made me feel happy and honored that it had manifested itself to me. It was the year 1998 in Germany, when I was working in an office with a colleague who is now my life partner. At the time, we didn't know each other very well. One night, after he had left his desk for a minute or two, I looked over and saw someone sitting in his chair, looking at me. It was a little man, but not human, about 1 meter tall. I just stood there and looked at him. After a few seconds, he vanished into thin air. When my colleague returned and sat down in the same chair, I told him what I'd experienced. He told me that he had recently been on vacation in Ireland. Unfortunately, I can't remember exactly what the fairy looks like or what clothes he wore, but I would say he resembled a leprechaun. He may have been wearing a hat, but I can't remember for certain. I have been thankful ever since that he allowed me to see him before he faded away. I'll never forget the intensity of that moment for as long as I live. After the encounter, I looked for pictures of fairies and found that a leprechaun most closely resembled what I had seen. The interesting thing is that I had never heard or read about leprechauns before this happened. Of course, I can't completely rule out that I may have seen a picture of a fairy like him at some point before, but it was only after the encounter that I began researching them. I'm pretty sure I can rule out hallucination because the encounter excited me so much. I felt lucid and awake. If I'd imagined it, why would I not have seen more of them as well? And it never happened to me again. I believe fairies may be other life forms that exist alongside us. When we're lucky and happen to be in the right state or the right frequency, we may be allowed to glimpse into a reality that exists beside our own. Back when I was a college student, around 19 years old, my parents bought a house. My father had recently retired and finally had saved enough money to own a home rather than rent. The day we went to see the house for the first time, we were all very excited. My older sister ran to the pink room, which we believed was our room. There we admired the new paint and sat on an old bed, happily. While we were talking, I asked my sister if she thought there were any fairies in the house since it was empty. I used the Philippine Tagalog word maligno for fairy. Later, I learned they don't like being called that. The moment I said the word, something forcefully slapped me on the side of my head. My sister, who was sitting about 4 meters away facing me, saw my head jerk to the side and watched me grab my head in pain. She hadn't moved and had no reason to hit me and wasn't close enough to do it anyway. I immediately realized I had probably insulted whatever was there, so I apologized out loud. After that, nothing else happened, and my sister and I continued our conversation. I wasn't especially frightened, but I knew there was some kind of presence in the house my parents had just bought. There was also a large termite mound on the property. In our folklore, people believe these mounds can be the homes of dwarfs, but because it was a termite nest, my parents had it removed. Later, my mother also had a tall mango tree in the yard cut down because its roots were damaging the soil, the gate, and other plants. I wonder if we might have disturbed something by doing so, because there were lots of other strange experiences in that house over the years. About 37 years later, I returned to my parents' house for a visit and slept in the bedroom. During the night, I woke suddenly to find what looked like a goblin sitting on my chest. It seemed to be breathing deeply, sucking the breath right out of me. After that, I slept with the lights on every night and kept my angel stone beside me while I slept. To this day, I wonder if it could be some kind of fae. If so, why would it try to steal a person's breath? Does anyone know? That's my story of all the strange things that happened in the house my parents bought, which I believe might be haunted by fairies. Thanks for watching, and thank you to everyone who shared their stories and for all your continued support for this channel and this kind of content. If you're looking for more fairy content from me and you haven't already, I definitely encourage you to check out my novel, The Ghosts of Nothing, from magical and spooky adventure into the fairy world as I see it. If you like the channel, I really think you'll enjoy it. I'm editing book 2 as we speak and plan on publishing it very soon. So there will be a second book in the series that you can pick up after this one. There's also an audio version if you prefer to listen in your spare time. You can check it out. I really hope you enjoy it. Link to the book is in the description. If you sign up for my newsletter, Fairy Lights, you get entered in a monthly draw for a free version of the audiobook. It's free to join. The link is also in the description. Plus, I post these fun fairy world headlines every month in a series I call Fairy News, so it's worth signing up just for that if you like a little bit of fairy magic once a month in your inbox. If you have your own fairy experience to share, please definitely send it through the form on my website. I'd love to read it and narrate it. Thank you so much, as always, to anyone who supported this channel, whether through Patreon, Coffee, channel memberships, or the paid option of my newsletter. You really encourage me and help me keep this work going, especially since the YouTube algorithm can be a bit hit and miss. So I just want to thank you all so much and tell you how much I appreciate your support. If you'd like to add your support to this work, all the support options are in the description. Remember to like, hype, share, and subscribe if you're new. That's a great way to support the channel as well. And tap the bell to be notified of new videos. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.